Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Get to Know Look Lab webinar. We're so pleased to be sharing more about our brand new eye gaze software with you today. My name is Hannah, and I will be chairing today's session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, if you could please pop them into the chat, and we will come back to them at the end. So let's start by hearing from our panel. Trevor, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your role at Smartbox.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to be with you. I'm very excited to present Look Lab to you today. My role at Smartbox is managing the content team. So normally that's the creation of grid sets, and I focus usually on the text AAC side of things. So Fast Talker, Text Talker, accessible apps, and all those kind of things. But for the last probably at least 18 months, been focusing on the design and creation of Look Lab and pulling this project together. So we're delighted to be able to share it with you today. Yeah,
That's great. Thank you, Trevor. And Andrea, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea King. I am a licensed speech language pathologist in the United States. I was practicing for about 13 years until I joined the Smartbox family about 2 years ago. And currently I am a regional product specialist in Pennsylvania.
That's great. Thank you, Andrea. And I think we're ready to get started.
Great stuff. Okay, so the first thing we want to tell you is what is Look Lab. We're going to start there. So in this session, we'll tell you a little bit about what Look Lab is. We also aim to tell you who it's for, how it can help practice different eye gaze skills and how it can be used for assessment, tracking progress, how it can be set up for different types of users, and all those good things. But essentially, Look Lab is 38 really fun and engaging activities, games, puzzles, creative activities that are designed to help someone practice and learn the skills required to use eye gaze successfully, looking towards being able to use eye gaze for communication and maybe for environment control, computer control, and all those good things. So the first thing we wanted to do really is just give you a little glimpse of some of the activities that are within the software. So this is just a short 2-minute video that would just show you the breadth of the different type of activities that are within Look Lab.
Right. So Trevor kind of gave you that little sneak peek there of what is Look Lab. So let's kind of discuss really why we made Look Lab, and let's go back to the beginning. So AAC devices are accessed in various ways based on the user's needs. You know, it could be switches, it could be direct selection via touch, it could be an EMG muscle switch, it could be eye gaze, it could be a head pointer. There's so many different access methods that someone can utilize in order to access their communication device. So really, what we're looking at mostly is one of those ways, which is eye gaze. And some can even use a combination as well. So eye gaze might be the only way that someone can access a device though, which is fantastic, but that can also take a lot of time to get used to. You know, users may need and want to introduce that new access method into a different way versus just kind of jumping right into the communication grid sets. There's a lot more complex interfaces as well, in addition to communication grid sets, like our accessible apps, computer control grid set, and things like that. And so we know that one way to introduce eye gaze is through games and activities. It builds, you know, confidence, stamina, ability. Because if you've used eye gaze, if you've tried eye gaze, you know that it's not just kind of a set up and go kind of access method. That stamina that you need is real. Users can fatigue in the beginning and even when using for longer periods of time. And I think that growing that stamina, growing that confidence for a user is so imperative so that you want to use the device. And I think that, you know, sometimes just starting off with a communication grid set isn't always for everybody right off the bat. And so that's kind of why Look Lab came to be. So something for everybody. We'll kind of take a little bit further look into that. So we kind of know what it is, why we made it, and now who is it for? So accessibility wise, Look Lab is for users that utilize eye gaze access or also a head mouse or head pointer access as well. And so we'll kind of take a look at that a little bit more as well. So suitable for AAC users, maybe who are just getting started with eye gaze for the first time, and maybe they're looking for ways to practice in more of a relaxed setting, more of a fun and engaging way. Maybe a user who, you know, kind of left that cause and effect beginning portion of their communication journey and that they built and look to learn. And now they're ready to move on to some newer activities that are a little more challenging. Also, maybe for users that really want to improve accuracy and precision skills for more of those complex grid sets that I mentioned before, like computer control. And then something fun, you know, and I've been saying that a lot, looking for something fun, motivating to do, even if it's not just to learn something, but maybe you just want something to do during leisure time. You know, when you're feeling bored, you sometimes just want to play a game, fill your time. Something a little bit more advanced, a little more challenging. And then the last one too, I love this, looking for ways to express themselves creatively through accessible art and music activities, because being able to create and show your personality in these different forms is wonderful.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrea. So what we want to do now is show you a little bit about how Look Lab is organised in terms of where to find those 38 activities. And this is the home screen of the software. And you can see that there are 5 different categories of activity plus a favourites category, which basically is you customise that for yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So we've got the fun category. This is one of the ones where you probably start in, fun, relaxing games that are easy to learn and get started with. Challenge is again a collection of games, but that perhaps are a little bit more complex, a little bit more strategy involved, maybe some timing and reaction skills in those ones. Puzzles is what it says on the tin, really. It's activities with a more of a problem-solving element. Mindfulness are just nice, relaxing activities that are essentially just cause and effect, not loads to them, just simple, straightforward and relaxing. And then creative are based on music and art activities. So if we just go a little bit into each of those. So as I said, the fun games are a great place to start, and there's a whole range of them. And the way that we've organized them within the software is that, generally speaking, within the fun and challenge categories, the ones that are sort of top left, if you start from there, they're kind of the simplest, and then they sort of build in difficulty or complexity a little bit as they go through. We will be explaining to you that each activity has an easy mode and a standard mode, though, so you can adjust the difficulty of each one. But within fun, you've got a whole range of different things in here. You saw a few of these in the video a few moments ago, and we'd encourage you to explore these for yourself. At the moment, until the end of the month, Look Lab is completely free to use. You can just download it and use it. All the activities are unlocked, and use it as much as you like. So let's just move into challenge. As I said, these activities are just a little step up in difficulty, probably from the fun ones, and they might involve some timing. For example, in pipe dodge here, you'll see the bird flying along these pipes. Kind of, you've got to fly in between the pipes and collect the coins and try not to collide with those. So you've got to, and in standard mode, that kind of speeds up as you go along. But in easy mode, the difference would be that if you do accidentally hit one of these pipes, you can just keep going. In standard mode, that's game over if you hit one of the pipes. So that's how you can adjust the difficulty in that particular example. I want to show you, I'm just going to nip quickly into Look Lab to show you one of these activities, which is Hedgehopper. We mentioned earlier that you can use Look Lab from like really early eye gaze skills, but then right through to learning a skill like computer control. And Hedgehopper would be an example of one where, if you were learning computer control, you might use Hedgehopper. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So I've gone into the challenge category. Hedgehopper's on the second screen. You can see that I'm navigating by dwelling in the interface. The whole interface is fully accessible. I'm just using a standard mouse, but I could be moving this eye gaze dot around with an eye gaze camera, and I can set this up and start the activity using the eye gaze camera. So let's just go in at level 1. Okay, so thinking about computer control, if I were in computer control, I'd need to set the position of my cursor first of all, and that's what I'm going to do here. Actually, I haven't done a great job of that, so I'm going to unlock that and move it. And what I actually want to do is put my cursor here, and that locks it into position. And then I'm going to choose fire to launch my hedgehog here and destroy the pesky fox. But if it's computer control, I'd probably be choosing left click at this point. So you can see how the skills are transferable over from one to the other. There you go, level complete. And Andrea, I think you wanted to mention Crawley Cruncher in this category.
I did. So Crawley Cruncher is one of those activities that stands out to me that really works on a transferable skill that I think would be more suited for a drive-by eye or driving your wheelchair with your eyes. And because of that, Crawley Cruncher really works on attention to task and sustained visual attention and keeping the eyes on the screen. So when you can kind of see Trevor playing this, you're going to notice that Crawly Cruncher will have a constant change of direction. And if you've ever seen a drive-by eye interface, it's what it looks like is there will be arrows in different quadrants on the screen for the user to drive their wheelchair in either of those directions. And truly, to navigate in certain areas, you're looking in different directions in order to move your wheelchair very consistently. So you can kind of see we're following our little crawly guy around, helps kind of build that skill that's transferable.
Wow. Okay, I better stop. I could go for my high score, but 29 is probably enough at this point. I should say, as we're sharing the software over a webinar, it may not look quite as smooth as it does if you're playing it on your own device. But I can assure you that the activities are silky smooth. Okay, let's just move quickly to tell you a little bit about the other categories. So within puzzle, as I said, these are problem solving type activities. And there's quite a range of different types of puzzle here. So some of them are really quite simple, like memory match, for example. You can see from the little preview there, what you're doing there is basically finding pairs of cards that match, and you turn them over one at a time using by dwelling on the cards, and you have to find a pair and then move on. So that's you could use that activity probably quite early on in your eye gaze journey. But then something like mouse maze, this is where you have to direct the mouse to collect the cheese around the screen and unlock the door and escape from the level. Now, some of those, as you get into the higher levels, there are quite a few levels within it. Some of those are actually take quite a lot of figuring out, and some of the Smartbox team have got stuck on one or two of them. So just to illustrate that within the puzzle category, there is a wide range of different types of challenge, and really can keep you guessing for some time. Some of those, there's some great fun in there. The mindfulness category, as I mentioned before, are really the simplest category. Fish pond, for example, the fish swim around the screen, you have lovely calm serene music, but you can prod the fish and they'll swim away, or you can dwell and you can drop a pellet of fish food in there, and it's just nice, relaxing, but also just learning that as you move your eyes around the screen, that is having a direct consequence in what you're seeing in front of you. The pass and pop activity, that's that very satisfying experience of popping those bubbles of bubble wrap. You can spend hours doing that, and that's essentially what this activity is about. But to complete one level of pattern pop, you need to pop all the bubbles on the screen. So that's a really good one for practicing moving your eye around every area of the screen, but also as an assessment tool. It quickly becomes evident if some areas of the screen are more difficult than others. So you can use some of these activities in lots of different ways, really. And then finally, creative. We've got the musical activities on the top row here and the art ones beneath. So depending on what kind of a mood you're in, the beatbox is a drum machine essentially, where you can create a custom sequence and play the drums to your heart content. It starts with a preset sequence, so you can play that and just modify it, or you can completely scrap that and create your own unique beat. Guitar, you strum the chords, so as your eyes travel over the strings, you're playing those strings, and you can change chord on the top row there, and you can also have the guitar sort of auto play, so you just change the chord and the software does the playing for you. And a very similar idea with piano as well. And then at the bottom, pixel paint is the easier of the two here. You just choose a color, and then as your eye travels around, it will color in all the dots that match that color, and you have to complete the whole picture and color in There's a whole range of different pieces of art that you can colour in any way that you please, and some of them are nice, big, simple geometric patterns like this, with big areas to fill in. Some of them are much more detailed, so if you want to really practice that precision element, you can use colouring in that way. And when you've finished your piece of art, you can download the image as well to your computer and print it out if you want to, or just save it to evidence progress as well. So that's the different categories of activity.
And all of the activities that Trevor has shown you, I think together make up a very thoughtful, a very comprehensive package of activities. And you might have noticed that some of these games are really similar to things that you've probably have played maybe in the past. I know I recognize some of the activities maybe we play on our phone, and they're fun, they're addictive. We can spend some significant time in our day passing away doing these activities. And then we know too that learning through gaming is a well-proven and a motivating approach. And really the priorities for the project of making Look Lab was to make something suitable for all ages, not just for someone who is younger and starting out, which we'll kind of touch on, but really something for teens, for older kids, for adults, concentrating on ways that users can improve their eye gaze skills, the way that you can support assessments and progress, increase and maintain user engagement, and really ongoing skill building and confidence. And I think by keeping a user's motivation, it's encouraging more practice, more repetition. And I think that in turn also improves confidence. And I really truly believe that for eye gaze, confidence is key. Communication isn't always motivating for everyone. So by doing an alternative activity like Look Lab, you're building confidence and you're building skill. And I truly think that it leads to less chance of device abandonment. And by device abandonment, I mean, when a user receives a device, maybe they don't feel as supported when they receive it. Maybe they're not feeling successful with it. And yeah, just like Chris says, it needs to feel like it's not always work, and you want it to be fun. And with device abandonment, it's eventually where the user just kind of says, no, thank you, pushes that device to the side and doesn't utilize it anymore, which I think, is really a travesty in the long run. So by doing an activity like this, maybe that will be one extra thing to help build that confidence and really decrease abandonment. So we looked at 12 key eye gaze skills. Right now, I'm going to pick out 4 of these 12 skills and kind of discuss them and the activities that go with it as well. So the first one is exploration in the upper left. So exploration, these are activities that are encouraging the user to look around the entire screen. Maybe that's really good for users that have visual spatial concerns that you maybe as a clinician or a communication partner are concerned that the user is only looking at half the screen. Maybe their lower quadrant hasn't been accessible for them. So by practicing exploration and making things a little bit more encouraging, you can start to work on that skill. The next one is sustained attention. And I mentioned this one with Crawley Cruncher. These are activities that are requiring the user to focus on certain areas of the screen with no distraction from other areas. And so with that sustained attention, you're maintaining the gaze and you're keeping that gaze as well during the entire activity versus looking away. So kind of building that stamina up with your visual skills. The third is precision. And these activities require the user to display a very higher level of precise eye gaze skills to achieve success. So maybe thinking about precision in terms of working towards communication cell selection in language systems. Maybe our precision isn't as accurate initially, and we might need some larger targets or larger cells to work on. But as we're progressing visually and we're becoming more confident, we might be able to select smaller targets, which in turn would also be smaller cells, which could increase to a larger grid size and something maybe more robust communication wise for our AAC users. And then looking at problem solving, these are the ones that require that logical thinking to overcome challenges and make planned eye gaze movement to solve the puzzles. And that's where Trevor was kind of talking about the computer control. When you're thinking of a planned eye gaze movement, you're not just looking at a screen and kind of getting that cause and effect. What this one is doing is really making one selection that will directly affect your next selection. So thinking in terms of computer control, we're making and deciding which mouse click we want. Do we want right? Do we want left? Do we want a double click? And then planning, then when we open up our program over on the other side of our screen potentially. And so you're really planning ahead on how you want to gaze and where you want to go, and then the direction and the order that you're moving in.
Fantastic. So, in thinking about you building those skills, how do we sort of track progress in uh, how things are changing over time? And we've included some tools that will really help with that. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the heat maps. And the heat map, as you can see on the screenshot there, where it says analysis, screenshot showing the guitar activity. Every time you run an activity, this heat map is being generated in the background. It does take a few minutes in order to build up enough data for it to be useful. But what happens is the areas of the screen that the user is looking at are traced on the heat map, and the more that one particular area is gazed upon, the hotter the color for that area. So you just can quickly see just in a pictorial form, where has the user been looking and for how long. So then you can immediately start to see which areas of the screen, are there any areas of the screen that are hard to access, for example. Was the user tracking an object as it moved around the screen? In this case, you can see clearly in the screenshot that the strumming action that's taken place there to play the guitar itself. And you can view this. Oops, sorry, I have switched slides accidentally. You can view the heat map at the end of an activity, or when you've paused an activity, and you can also download that image to your computer, and that will download to your downloads folder, and it will be named with the file name will be the name of the activity with the date and time, so that you'll be able to maybe save that in a user's folder and compare a heat map from one time to maybe a few weeks later to see how things have changed. So the heat maps are a really useful tool. On their own, you can't really use the heat map to infer understanding or intention. All it really shows is where the eyes have traveled around the screen. So what you really need to do is use these tools alongside observation, and maybe alongside other measurables like high score in a particular activity and that kind of thing. And so we've also included other tools to help you track that other data as well. So we have the Lab Workbook, and at the end of the presentation, we'll give you the link to show you where you can download this. But this is a collection of worksheets which allow you to track progress over time. They are PDF files which are editable, which means that you can just fill them in even within a web browser, tick the boxes, fill in the comments, and save those digitally onto your own device into a folder. So you don't have to print them out, but equally, if that works better, you can print them as well. So the workbook is available from our Smartbox hub, and as well as the complete workbook, you'll find on the same site there are individual files for each of the worksheets, because there's a separate worksheet file for each of the 38 activities.
Kind of taking a look initially, this is the skills checklist. There's multiple pages of this because they include every activity, each of the 38. So if I wanted to take a look at the skills checklist, it kind of breaks it down into graph form of the activity and then which eye gaze skills that you're working on. So if I wanted to go to, let's say, hoops, which is the basketball one, I could scroll down, look at hoops, and start gazing to my right, and I can see that tracking is checked. So I'm working on an eye gaze skill tracking. I would be working on reactions and also working on my horizontal control. So that breaks it down each game into more of like an activity or an eye gaze skill that not necessarily always measurable, but provides a lot of good information to the user and to the clinicians. And then kind of taking a look how Trevor had mentioned that there are worksheets for every single activity. We've been talking about Crawly Cruncher a lot. So looking at Crawly Cruncher, this is really nice. As a clinician, I appreciate this a lot. Looking at the skills that just this activity work on, the objectives, and the comments. And I think too, because sometimes from the outside looking in, someone might say, well, these are just games. You're just playing around. How is this really helping you build a skill? And I think by looking at these worksheets, you do have a way to explain like, hey, these users are working on their exploration, their sustained attention, their reaction times. And then looking at the objectives of them as well. Like you're able to explore and look at different parts of the screen. And then you can also check, did you observe this? Do we feel like this is a developing skill? Did we achieve it? And then you also have the ability to put dates in here. And then also what I love is, as a clinician, I love quantitative data. You can put the scores. So maybe the first time you did this game, your score was 4. The next worksheet that you do, maybe it's 15. You're showing that quantitative progress and the skills that you're growing, not just saying like, hey, I'm having fun and I feel like I'm getting better, but you're showing that you're improving as well, which is something that I think is truly important. And then you can write comments in here. And then, even if you want to make notes, there's something you're writing down, you're turning in, you can put these transferable skills like, hey, my user's goal is to be able to use ability drive or drive by eye. So this is why we're working on this exact activity. And you're able to put, calibration, patterns, just so many different things. And also being able to write down, are you using this in easy mode? Are you using this in standard mode? And kind of showing that progression.
Okay, and yeah, another way, obviously, to track progress is from user feedback from the users themselves, and this is Tolu, and that's his quote on how he feels that Look Lab has helped him, and we wanted to mention Tolu at this point because we designed Look Lab in collaboration with a number of users who gave us feedback from a really early stage, and Tolu was one of that group. So although it's a brand new product, he's actually been using it for quite a period of time and has really road tested it. And this is his feelings on how it's helped him. But the feedback from Tolu and other users that we work with has been so valuable, and their feedback has helped to shape the product, and a lot of the activities were revised along the way as a direct result of their feedback, and the interface itself of the software. So we're really delighted to have been able to work with a group of users who've really been able to steer the direction of this project. We felt that was really important, rather than do user testing sort of in the last stages where you basically say, we've made this, what do you think of it? we went to a group of users and said, this is what we're hoping to make, what should it be like, and then worked along that whole journey with them, and that's been really, really great. So Tolu's tested LookLab a lot. His favourite activities were tunnel dash and hoops. We're going to take a look at hoops in a moment, so you'll get to see that one. And this is Donna, who works with Tolu, and that's her take on her experiences with LookLab whilst the user testing phase has been taking place. So that's really encouraging to hear. So we are going to start to move now to look a little bit about setting up LookLab in terms of the options, the settings, and the customization that's available within it, so that you can optimize the software to work really well with the individual that's using it at the time. And so one thing to say about the eye gaze camera itself, if you're using one of these 4 cameras, Lumini, Alea, iRespond, or iTech, you don't need any other software other than LookLab in order for the eye gaze camera to function within the software. If that camera's plugged in, you can just look at the screen and move the cursor around without any other software at all. If you're using a different type of camera, though, that doesn't stop you from using LookLab at all. There are 2 options. You can use our Grid 3 software in computer control mode. We've got a special grid set that's designed to work with LookLab that will support that function. Or you can use the software that came with your eye gaze camera that would just move the cursor around the screen, and then LookLab will work just fine. We designed the whole of the interface to be eye gaze accessible, and I showed that a little bit a few minutes ago, and we'll talk in a moment about how you can change which elements of the interface you can access with eye gaze, so depending on how much control the user is going to have of the software. There are settings like you can change whether the background music plays or not, whether there are sound effects, whether the cursor, the eye gaze cursor, it was a dot in the demo I just showed you. You can have it as crosshairs or as a triangular cursor. You can change the dwell time, for example, as well, between 5 different speeds. So there are lots of settings, and you get to those all from the home screen and options in the corner. And we're going to show you how in a moment how to change a couple of those settings. But Andrew's just going to tell you a little bit about those access restrictions.
Yeah, so there's the ability to choose your access options into independent, choice making, and guided. So when I'm looking at independent, the user would have full accessibility to everything, including settings with no restrictions. Kind of moving into choice making, this is where the user can choose and launch and exit their own activities, but certain settings are restricted. And then guided is really meant to be used with a communication partner who guides the user through the activity selection process using like a mouse, a keyboard, or even touching the screen. And then another option is the appearance of the screen. So for anyone with a visual impairment or who requires a more simplified visual experience, you can change these from a detailed mode to a minimal mode. So just kind of by looking at the screen, you can tell now we've gotten rid of like that bluish green background with the shadowing in it to an all black, more high contrast background as well. With a little bit more, just less colors as well. And you'll see when we get into it that some of the sizes will change as well for other settings. And then with those sizes, this is where that comes in. We have standard mode and easy mode. So when you think about easy mode, you're kind of going through learning how to do the activity, how to play it with really no ramifications or consequences that will happen. Versus when I move into standard mode, that's where you start to really get that challenging part where you have lives and sometimes you won't make it and you're going to lose the game. And it just has that more competitive edge to it, and time can be a little bit more limited as well. So for this one, what we're going to do is Trevor is going to take us on a little tour of how we might set up Look Lab for somebody. So I have an example. So I have a user right now. They use a GridPad 15 with Illumini, which is one of our native camera options. The user is 19 years old. This is their first AAC device, and they of course use eye gaze. There are some vision concerns. It's been reported that the user has difficulty visually with too much stimuli, but we don't necessarily have a diagnosis right now. It's been recommended that the user have a high contrast kind of color scheme, and they're still really working on with their communication partner on a lot of getting to know their device. So we're going to talk about why we're going to choose the settings that we've worked with, and that what options there are that could best fit this user.
Okay, so here we are back in Look Lab. From the pause menu, by the way, to get back to choose a different activity, you would just choose home. We'll go there. I'm just going to go into the hoops activity just with all the standard settings first of all. So I'll go into hoops on standard, and so here the activity is catch the balls in the hoop. If I miss one, I've lost one life. I get 3 lives. And if a bomb comes, don't catch the bomb. Okay, so that's hoops in standard mode. Now, if we were going to set up Look Lab for the user that Andrea just described, there are a few things that we want to change. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to go into options, and you can see here options are split into these 4 categories. And I'm going to go into accessibility first of all, and I'm going to go into the minimal mode because I think that high contrast, less distraction mode is going to be useful for this user. So let's just switch over to minimal. And while we're here in accessibility, let's go into restrictions. And this is where you choose which elements of the interface you can control via eye gaze, as Andrea described. At the moment, we're in independent. So on any of these cells, I can dwell on them to make a selection. But I'm going to switch from independent to guided, because in this case, the communication partner is going to set up the activity, all the settings, and then just hand over control once the game is underway. So let's go into guided. I've got a warning now that there's going to be certain things now that aren't eye gaze accessible, and that's fine. So I'm going to click with my mouse on continue. You can see that the appearance of these cells has changed now, because now I'm in guided mode, and the cells which can't be accessed via eye gaze anymore, they're in this darker color. And as I just leave my cursor over those, you see I can't dwell to select those, but the ones that are in the lighter gray color, I can still dwell on those. So you can see that I can still rest, and I can always switch to grid in any mode, and that is to switch to grid for communication. So that's always going to be available, and I'll show that in a moment as well. So having made those changes, what we will do now is let's just check that it's not going to be too noisy and startle our user. So let's just go into sound, and we can see that Volume is set on low, so that's going to be okay, I think. And for now, I'm going to leave the music and the sound effects on, but if they became a distraction or just became annoying, you can turn them off. So let's go into fun now. Now you can see these categories. Again, I can't dwell on these now because we're in guided mode. So I, as the communication partner, would select either with a mouse click or via the touch screen. And again, I'll need to do the same to get into the activity itself. And I'm going to change here to easy mode as well. And click on start. You can see straight away, visually, it's no fancy background. We've just got the plain black background. The hoop's a lot wider, so the game's a lot easier. And if I do miss, I still get that sound effect so that I know that I've missed it, but I don't lose a life. I can just keep going. So I can practice this for as long as I want to. Now in standard mode, what happens is with hoops, the balls will eventually start coming faster and faster, and they come really thick and fast. And you've obviously got to avoid the bombs as well. But in easy mode, they're just going to come at this steady pace, and I won't have the bombs to contend with either. And I might work at this level for some time, and then it might become too easy, and I can just flick the mode over to standard, and we can play it in that mode. So that's a little bit about how we'd set up for this user the options. And the last thing I'll show you is perhaps we've been playing the activity for a few minutes, and we might want to get some feedback, like, how's it going? Do you want to carry on? Do you like it? So we can switch over to grid, and in grid I've got this is the Look Lab companion grid set, and we've got this grid here which is based on the Supercore learning grids, where the user can say, actually stop that now, I've had enough, thanks, let's have something different. Okay, there's 37 more activities to go at, so that'll be just fine. And then we can just dwell on this cell and we switch directly back into Look Lab, and you can just switch back and forth like that. You may also want to switch into grid to check eye gaze positioning, or to calibrate the camera, and so on and so forth. You would do that within grid as well. Yeah, so that's how we would customize Look Lab for that user.
So, Look Lab is now added to, as the companion to what I call our Look to family. All the way from Look to Learn, which is for our users with very early eye gaze, to Scenes and Sounds, which is the expansion pack to Look to Learn, all the way up to Look Lab, which instead of just very early eye gaze, it's all ages, including teens and adults. And looking at these, if you're curious, why would you choose one or the other? It could be age. It could be that Look to Learn really focuses on the cause and effect and starts a little bit more simpler, whereas Look Lab grows in more complexity, and that's something that would interest you. Everything will still be for sale along with Look Lab. You still have the options to choose any of these Look to options. And then also, I didn't mention Look to Read, our activity in our software for working on sounds and phonics and literacy skills for our users without natural speech.
Okay, so I promised you earlier on that I would show you how to get to some of those resources that we talked about. So the first one here is to download Look Lab itself. And as I said, there's a free trial throughout the whole of July. So feel free to download it and evaluate it as much as you want. After this month, what will happen when you download Look Lab onto a new device is you will get a 14-day fully functional trial. Then after those 14 days, it will go into a demo mode in which 2 of the activities will remain unlocked after that. So you can download the software from that website there, or you can just scan the QR code and go directly to that page. And to get the workbook, the getting started manual, those worksheets and all of that, progress tracking resources, that's on the Smartbox hub at that address there, but again you can access it via that QR code. And also, just to mention, until the end of this year, individuals or families who have Grid or other Smartbox software already can get 50% off the price of LookLab. And if you want to know more about the pricing in your country, there's an email address there where you can get in touch and talk to us about that. So at this point, I guess I hand it back to our chair to chair the question session.
Thank you, Trevor and Andrea. That was so brilliant to see LookLab in action and find out more about all the features. Just really excited to hear how people get on with it. We've had a few questions in the chat, some of which have been answered along the way, but we can recap on some of them. So Joanna asked if LookLab was available to people who use Smartbox software already, or is it an additional cost? So just to recap there, it is a separate software package. So it isn't an extra cost. But if you contact us, you can get more information about pricing. And there is that offer to the end of the year, which gives you a 50% discount if you are a Smartbox user. We also had the question about the workbook, so hopefully that's given you a bit more insight into what the workbook looks like, and there's a link to the hub available in the chat. We also had a question from, I think it was Kristen. Yep, she's asked, is there an activation component in some of the activities? For example, have to sustain attention for a set time to make something happen? If so, can it be switched from dwell to blink to switch to click? That's something, Trevor, you can help with?
Yes. So within LookLab, the activation is always by dwelling. We don't have the option built in to use blink to click or switch to click. Those are options that are available within our Grid 3 software. And we do have interactive learning grids within Grid 3 that come with the software that would be probably useful for learning those alternative access methods. And so it might be a progression thing where you would start off in LookLab and build towards those interactive learning grids within Grid 3.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. And then we have a question from Chris. Is it possible to chat with the user's language system, including for modeling?
Yeah, I don't know if Andrea wants to take that one.
Yeah, Andrea?
Yeah, so there's ways, when Trevor went back into Grid 3 that I think we could, I don't think that would be an issue, Trevor, to be able to put in the user's language system through a Grid 3 command that could be utilized instead of that, I forget what it was, a 12-cell grid that Trevor was utilizing,
Yeah.
but that shouldn't be an issue, that if you have one already, we can change the command for that.
Yes, so we do have a video on our website in the hub about how to do this. And essentially you just need, what you could do is literally add the LookLab companion grid set and then select this cell here and copy that and paste it into any other grid set. So if it was VocaChat or SuperCore or whatever, and it's a really simple command. It's just a start program command, which just has LookLab as the target. And once that's in place, then if you had that, whatever grid set you have open, then within LookLab, when you activate that grid cell, it will switch to the last grid that you open. So that would obviously then, if you had SuperCore open, it would switch to that. Yeah, I would just like to add an addendum to the last question about blink to click and switch to click. If you're using other software to make that happen, then you could use those access methods within LookLab. Basically, anything that can emulate a mouse click would have the same effect as the dwell. And so, if you were using, say, a Kuha head tracker with a switch plugged into it, then that switch would emulate the mouse click. So it really depends what hardware you're using it with.
Okay, I think we've got just a couple more. So Margie has asked, is it a single license or subscription?
It
Trevor?
is a, oh, go ahead.
Go on, Andrea, you started.
I was going to say it is a single license. There is no subscription. And I did see Maggie's question about a bundle deal, who might want all of the Look To, from Look to Learn all the way to Look Lab. I think based on the country you're in, we're all working on getting a good pricing for that bundle. So based on where you are, please email us and let us know. We can kind of get that together for you.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we've gone through all the questions. We will keep tabs on the chat in case you have something after the webinar and let you know and come back to you. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was so great to see so many people arrive and get involved with the chat. If you do have a spare 2 minutes, we have a very short webinar feedback form. I'll put a link in here. If you could fill that in, that would really help us improve the next time. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Trevor and Andrea for being fantastic hosts.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming along. It's been great to talk to you.